I'm Jayadev Misra. I was born in India, in the state Odisha, in a town called Cuttack. I was born in my grandfather's house, but my father was a lawyer in a small town in Odisha called Keonjhar, where I grew up until I passed my pre-university exam, and then I joined IIT Kanpur. I come from a family with 6 children. My father was a lawyer, as I said before. My mother was a homemaker. I have an elder sister and 2 younger brothers and 2 younger sisters. My education at IIT Kanpur was from 1964 to 1969. Then I came for graduate studies in the United States. I joined the Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore, Maryland, and I completed my PhD in 1972. Then I married Mamta, and we moved to take up a job in the Washington DC area with the IBM Corporation. She went to college at the University of Maryland at College Park, and I continued as a staff programmer at IBM until we came to Austin in 1974.
My name is Mamta Misra. I was born in 1950 in a small town in the state of Odisha in India. My father was a professor in a college, a small college in Cuttack. That's how he started. We were 4 brothers and just I have 1 brother and 2 other sisters. I was the eldest daughter in the family. My mother was a homemaker. I grew up in Cuttack and Bhubaneswar, where I did my schooling, my early schooling up to high school. And I went to BJB College in Bhubaneswar, where I graduated with BSc with honors in physics. And then my family moved to Rajasthan. So we were in Ajmer for 2 years, and I did a master's in physics from the government college in Ajmer, which was under the Rajasthan University. And after that, we moved back to Odisha, and shortly after that, I got married to Jayadev. And in January of 73, shortly after we got married, we moved to Maryland in US. I wanted to go for higher education here in the United States, and I chose computer science as my subject, and I started taking some courses in College Park at the University of Maryland, and to qualify to get admission to graduate school in computer science. And right after that, we moved to Austin.
I joined the computer science department as an assistant professor at the University of Texas at Austin in 1974. The department at that time was relatively small compared to what it is today. We lived in Austin until 1983, when I took a leave to join Stanford University as a visiting professor for a year. I was promoted in the regular manner from assistant professor to associate professor to full professor, and by the time I joined Stanford, I was a full professor here. And we spent a year in California, where I was at Stanford and Mamta was a researcher at the IBM Research Center in San Jose. By then we had one child, Amitav, who was born in 1977. He went to primary school there, and we returned from there in 1984. And I have since then continued my career at the University of Texas at Austin, retiring in 2015. We had a second son, Anuj, in 1985, and so we have been lucky to have been blessed with 2 children. I have been retired since 2015, but I have been actively involved in research. I'm an emeritus professor at the university. I have my office at the university. I have graduate students whom I direct, and I go regularly to the university to interact with my students and other professors in the department. My research over the years have ranged in several topics, but the area for which I'm somewhat well known is called distributed computing, in which a number of computers collaborate to solve a problem. And with a colleague, K. Mani Chandy, who moved from here to Caltech in 1989, we established an area of distributed computing that is rather well known by now, and we wrote a book which is quite often cited. We wrote a book called Parallel Programming, a Foundation, with Prentice-Hall in 1988. And later I wrote another book called A Discipline of Multiprogramming with Stringer-Verlag in 2001. And I have had a modest amount of success in my career. I have been cited. I have been cited as a highly cited researcher by Thomson Reuters in 2006. I won an honorary doctorate from École Normale Supérieure in France. I won a Harry Good Medal from the IEEE Society, and recently I was elected to the National Academy of Engineering in the United States. I have won several teaching awards, among them the University Distinguished Professor and election to the Academy of Distinguished Teachers, and the Regent's Teaching Award given by the Regent of the University of Texas System. This was a follow-up to some of the work I had done earlier with my colleague in 1988 in the book Parallel Programming. The follow-up work took a long time. It was accomplished with the help of many of my students and colleagues, and this is a record of where my thinking stood on what distributed computing should look like in the year 2000.
We came to Austin in 1974, and because my husband joined the faculty here at UT, and I took admission in the graduate program in computer science, and I finished a master's in computer science from UT Austin in 1976. And I started working at a small company that was homegrown in Austin called MRI Corporation, which does not exist anymore. Working there for about 5 years after I started working there, the company was bought over by Intel. So I worked for Intel for some time, and then I was hired by IBM Corporation. And I worked at IBM Austin until 92, I believe. And in between, in the year 83, 84, my husband got a visiting assignment at Stanford in California, so we moved there, and I was able to work at the IBM research facility, which used to be at San Jose. So when I was at IBM, these were the early days of word processing, and there was a pilot project that IBM Research has designed, where you could. This is old technology compared to today's, but if you can think of a world before Apple came around with Macintosh and all these fancy things came, we had done a word processor where you could type up mathematical formulas and anything, and you could see it formatted on the screen. So that's the one I was working. That's the project I was working on at that time. It doesn't seem very important right now, but at that time, IBM journals came to consult with us to use it for publishing the IBM journals and all that. Let's see. Then I came back to IBM here. I was working on data stream architectures, and then I worked on the AIX operating system. I worked on a lot of languages that IBM developed, programming languages. Then in 1992, I was an advisory programmer there at IBM, and I was doing very well in my career. But I had two boys to take care of. One was a teenager, and the other one was in elementary school, having some special needs. And I decided to quit work and be a full-time mom. I had tried going part-time and full-time many times, and then finally I said no, it's not working, and I needed to spend full-time at home, and that's the reason I quit. But then I wasn't used to not working, because even when the kids were babies I had worked. So I was looking for volunteer work while the kids were in school. I volunteered even when I was working part-time. Before, I had volunteered at the it used to be called Travis County Literacy Council of Austin, something like that. So I was teaching adults how to read, and I had a few students that I was teaching. And then during that time in '92, just when I had quit, Saheli was starting up in Austin. So Kalpana Sutaria, who was the main force behind it, was asking people, women, to come to meetings and talk about what kinds of problems that were happening in Austin. And I was just watching it from a distance at that time. I didn't know if that's something I could do anything with. It seemed very remote. And and then in 1993, I was almost prompted and prodded by my aunt, who was already in Saheli. So in 1992, a group of women in Austin were getting together once a month. This was driven by Kalpana Sutaria in Austin. And they were were trying to figure out what are some of the problems affecting Indian women in Austin, for which there has not been any solution.
What kind of problems did they have?
So in the meetings, it surfaced that there were many women who are experiencing abuse, physical, emotional, financial, legal, all kinds of problems in their marriages, and they had nowhere to go, no one to turn to, no one to help them. Even though there were organizations in Austin that provided help to battered women, the women from our cultures did not feel comfortable seeking help from an American organization. They felt that perhaps nobody would understand their culture. In some cases, language was a difficulty for them. So many of these things would come up in these discussions. And at that time, I was just watching it from a distance. I didn't feel that I knew what to do with it, or I didn't know if the women were really serious and going to do something about it, or if it was just talk. So I was just watching it from a distance. And then in '93, by that time, my aunt, her name is Dula, she is no longer alive. She was already part of Saheli. She had taken training with Center for Battered Women. That was the name for the organization that was helping women in the 90s in Austin. And she had started helping Indian women. And because my aunt was living with us at that time, a lot of times her calls would come to the house, and sometimes I had to take messages from her. So in the process, I became more aware of how what she was doing was actually helping women. So I started conversations with her about this, and one day she told me that I could join and I could do this, and I could be, her words were, "You can help people without having the training, and so why don't you go take the training, and then you can help them so much better." So very reluctantly, I went and sat just out of curiosity to find out. So I took this 40-hour training with Center for Battered Women, and I came back a totally changed person. So I started volunteering both at Center for Battered Women, which is now called Safe Place, by the way. It merged with another organization that was called the Rape Crisis Center, and they became Safe Place. So Saheli was the name given to this organization that finally got incorporated in 1993 after I had already joined and was very active in it. And we had started our helpline in 1993, and initially we thought nobody was going to call. How would people find out about us? But before we knew, people were calling, and we were getting, the first year, I remember we had 75 calls, even in the first year. So it was real, and We had no idea how to go about it. Everything we had to figure out. The problem comes and we find a solution. So I took, because I wasn't working full time anymore, and I had all this time during the day when my children were at school, I started doing a lot of things. I was a volunteer at Safe Place, presenting to a lot of Austin high schools and middle schools about dating violence prevention in their Expect Respect program. I was a legal advocate helping women who went for protective orders in the courthouse. And all this I was doing in the mainstream with Safe Place, or Center for Battered Women as it was called then. And we were doing the same thing with Saheli.
When you said you were, when you did the Saheli as an Indian thing, how did the city help you is what we need to know.
City really didn't help us.
So none of the
No.
agencies help
So
you
the
set up?
agencies, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So with Saheli, there were many kinds of problems. First was to help the women who needed help, and their problems were manifold. They may need shelter, they would need help with their education and employment, they would need help with their legal issues. And with one domestic violence case, there could be 4 different kinds of legal issues. If they need protective order, that would be a civil case. If they need, if there was a criminal record, criminal report filed, if police was called, that would be a criminal case. Usually, if a woman files for a protective order, the husband would file for divorce, and so divorce, child custody, those things could go on. And then immigration. If the woman came as a dependent, then with divorce she could lose her immigration status. So there were, the legal problems were just manifold. In 1994, under the crime bill, President Clinton, Bill Clinton, signed the Violence Against Women Act of 1994. Before that, there was no provision for immigrant women to keep their visa. They would be forced to go back or stay here undocumented or change it to some other visa. It was a big problem. But 1994 was the first time we could do something about it. And I remember that we were already getting these cases, and the lawyers didn't even know. This act was so new. Immigration lawyers didn't know all the details. The regulations were still being written, and we had clients. In 1994, we had, one of our clients had applied for visa under the Violence Against Women Act. I remember going to an educational program for lawyers with a Saheli colleague, Indira Chakrabarti. So the 2 of us were the only non-lawyers in this class, 4 immigration lawyers, to know about this new law. So that was one problem, helping the clients. But then it was a big problem convincing our community that this problem exists. Most people didn't want, I wouldn't say most, but a lot of people didn't want, especially men, did not want us to talk about bad things about our community. They thought that these are just aberrations, just minor problems, happens very infrequently. So why hang your dirty clothes out in the public by making a big deal out of it? So it took us a long time in the 90s to convince the community, our own community, that this problem exists and you don't know this until it happens to your sister or your daughter. So those were very hard days to establish ourselves within our own community. Then there was the other part of giving culture-specific training to the agencies around us. So we were invited to talk at the Safe Place training about our culture. We worked with the local shelters and all the different agencies also, so that they could refer us when people went, when police, for example. And this is very interesting because we were Indians and we were working in the Indian and maybe South Asian community in general, and the word would spread by word of mouth. And so all the cases that were South Asian, from South Asian families would come to us through a friend, through a chain of friends. But when it was any other Asian family, those cases came to us because agencies referred. So other different Asian countries, and there were so many, they didn't know about Saheli. We didn't even speak the same language. But police didn't understand what is South Asia, what is East Asia. They had no idea. So Asia, okay, there is a Saheli, go there. So that's how it happened. So pretty soon we started getting calls from all these different countries. Koreans, Chinese, Japanese, you name it, Filipino. And it was pretty clear that we had to be Pan-Asian. We couldn't just be South Asian. So that was a fairly big struggle, because if you don't know there were similarities in the cultures, but languages were different and there were differences in the cultures. And we were an all volunteer organization for a long time. So cases were increasing. We were from 70 calls, we had gone up to like 400, 500 calls a year. We were helping 50 to 100 cases. I have to look at the old data to know, to remember. But, and we were all volunteers. I was the only person who had daytime available to go to court to do all this stuff. So the worry was, how do we expand the organization? How do we get money?
Yeah, that's the next question I was going to ask you. Till now, how did you survive for funding? That you tell me, and then you can go on.
Sure.
Yeah.
So initially when we started, there would be a room full of women. We would look what we have in our purse and we will put it on the table. And we used it to send meeting notes for postage. So that's how we had started, no money. And then we did small fundraisers. We combined outreach with fundraising together. So we would have some events and we would sell tickets. Sometimes we would join Indian events and we would cook and sell food. I remember kulfi, selling kulfi, and under the table would pass on the flyer so nobody looks because we were not so welcome talking about Saheli. And then slowly, after some time, Safe Place, which was Center for Battered Women, they noticed that because of us, they could reach out to this part of the community that wasn't accessible to them before. So they always had embraced us. They were like our big sister. We wouldn't have done anything without them. So we were volunteering for them anyway, hotline. I was doing school-based services, legal advocacy. I was in the speaker bureau. But anyway, they thought that they should, we were also raising money for the shelter, for the Safe Place shelter, because that's where our clients went too. So after some time, CVW, Center for Battered Women, said that whatever funds you raised through the Walk for Safe Families, you keep a percentage of it. So we started from 50% to then after some time they said, you just keep all of it. You don't have any money, you need it. You need it more than we do. So whatever money we raised through the walk, we kept. So that was our biggest source of money.
What's the amount you got?
I think we might have started out with a, 3,000 to 4,000 per walk. We moved up to 10,000, I remember. But in those days, that was a lot of money. And mostly we didn't have that many expenses either because we were all volunteers. So our expenses went directly to the clients for their legal expenses, things like that. We did a lot of outreach also. So we printed newsletters. I was very proud of our newsletter. Our newsletters has all our history over the first 12 years of history. So printing cost and things like that. But then anytime we talked about, we must have staff, somebody who would actually do the work. And it would come to, we don't have money. You can't hire people because you don't have money, and because you don't have staff, you can't really grow. So we were stuck in this catch-22. So I scratched my head, what do I do? And I noticed that in a Safe Place, it was Safe Place by then already. By the way, I did serve on the Safe Place board while I was doing Saheli. I was elected to their, as a volunteer representative to their board. That was the only board position that was by election. Because I spent so many hours volunteering, they gave me all these volunteer awards every year, and then I got elected to that. And so because I was in the board, I got a better idea of how an organization works, what the board members do in a bigger organization. And so that gave me more ideas about how to grow the organization. So there were all these young, energetic volunteers that were AmeriCorps volunteers. They were called VISTA, Volunteer in Service to America. So they were working at a Safe Place. So I got curious, well, how do we get those volunteers? They were working full-time, and can we get them? So I wanted to piggyback with Safe Place and get our projects into their program. And I was very good at doing that. I used to get calls from students trying to do internships.
Okay.
Different languages.
I missed all of it, so sorry.
That's okay.
I thought I had turned it on. Can you start where you said it went from small to the bigger Saheli? Sorry.
How many minutes do you think?
About 2 minutes, 3
okay.
minutes, yeah.
So then as the number of different Asian countries served grew, and the number of non-South Asian clients grew, it became pretty clear that the name should be something that is that everyone can relate to. So somewhere maybe around I don't know the exact year, but maybe 5 years after Linda had been ED, the name changed to Asian Family Support Services of Austin, AFSA, and that's the name by which it goes now. What else did you want me to say?
No, you moved away, and how are you helping them still, if you can say that?
So I just stayed. I didn't. I quit the board, and I was just available if anybody needed me. Just to provide mentorship and things like that. I even went to volunteer to scan files when they went from box to digital. So those kinds of things.
What about Kalpana?
Kalpana stayed in the board after Linda came on board. I think she stayed on board for a few more years, maybe 2 more years. But yeah, I think it became more of a functional board. So people from different functions that you need join, rather than people who just wanted to volunteer. So board function, volunteer role, staff role, ED role, it all got defined and isolated, and it became a full-fledged organization.
So while you were working for Saheli, what are the awards that you got and recognition?
Oh,
Please.
Yeah, my work was recognized fairly widely. Let me think. So, for the work I did for Saheli, I think one time YWCA gave me a Community Service Award, Woman of the Year, something like that. And the Samaritan Center and St. Edward's University, they do a Business in Ethics Award, and I had been a finalist twice. Then Austin Community Foundation once gave me an award that's given to a volunteer who has worked significantly for an organization. Actually, Saheli got some money for it too, which was a plus. It's called Jordan Award. And then of course the Indian and Asian organizations locally, the India Community Center, the network of Asian American organizations, NAAO, they all had recognized me for the work with Saheli. So I think I have been recognized way more than I deserve.
Oh, that's not true. That's not true.
Because I mean, it wasn't just me, it was so many people who did the work.
And state-wise, have you got any recognition? Nationally, have you got any recognition?
State-wise, nationally. So, the one thing that had happened is that while we were working locally on Saheli, in the United States, in many different cities, there had been organizations like Saheli. Before us, there was Manavi in New Jersey, and Sakhi in New York, Apna Ghar in Chicago. So those three were there already by the time Saheli started, and we had turned to them for help. And in a similar way, Saheli being the first one in Texas, we have helped many other organizations start up in Texas and in other states as well. So, that was one thing, one role we played. Daya started in Houston. More recently, Avaz started in San Antonio. But we used to go to their conferences, speak there before those organizations even started. San Antonio used to have a women's conference, and almost every year I would go there and talk about it. And it takes, you know, and again the national organizations started. So there was one organization called South Asian Association, what was it called? SACAP, Against Violence, South Asian Community Against Violence, something like that. So there were these electronic groups. So there was no umbrella organization. We were just networks of different organizations, and we would help one another out. So, because clients aren't fixed to Austin, they move around. So we had to work with so many different shelters and other organizations when a client moves, and we needed to learn from one another. So now there are national conferences that happen for Asians, South Asians, and also for all Asians. So there is the APIDV, and they may have changed their name now. All these names keep changing so many times. So APIDV was Asian Pacific Islander Organization Against Domestic Violence, I think. Institute, yeah, API, Asian Pacific Islander Institute Against Domestic Violence. So that started, so they started doing national conferences. So we would go there and attend those, and just bring ideas, give ideas. So there was a lot of interchange and exchange of ideas nationally. Then also taking these things to the wider communities. So I am from Odisha, so I am associated with the, what is it called? OSA stands for Odisha, what does it stand for? Odisha Society for the Americas. So it's Canada, US, North America usually. So they would have conferences, and I often would speak there, do women's seminars and conferences. We would speak in the Texas State Council Against Domestic Violence that operates the national hotline. So when they had conferences, I have spoken, and so I've spoken in national level conferences. So this is again more for outreach purpose, to spread the word out.
You've been recognized by them?
If you're asking about trophies, no.
Not trophies, just recognition of your work.
Recognition. So I've been invited to as keynote speaker. So there was an organization in Alabama that I had helped start. It's called Asha Kiran. So when they did their first big event, I was invited to be the keynote speaker there. So in that sense, yeah, I think the city of Alabama, what was the city? Huntsville, Alabama. The city gave me a certificate making me a honorary citizen. So there were things like that.
So with all your volunteer work, what is so close to you? How much do you think you achieved? What more do you want to see in other women wanting to, what's your advice for women?
I was trained not to give advice, so I'm the wrong person to ask. In working with clients of domestic violence, we learn to be non-judgmental and not give advice. We give them information so that they can make a decision. So being non-judgmental is very important to me. Listening is very important to me. Giving advice, who am I to give advice? Everyone has to decide for themselves. But let me tell you what I do now. So what have I been doing since I moved away from Saheli? So while I was with Saheli and working on these difficult cases, you absorb the pain of the people that you're working with. And so if you don't take care of that secondary pain, you would burn out. So how do you last for years? So that's when I started writing poetry. When I was helping women with Saheli. They were published, in different journals. Saheli newsletter would always carry. So I wrote prose and poetry. But after I quit Saheli, I finally had time to look at what I had. And all these years people were saying, oh, why don't you write a book and do this and that? Why don't you publish? And so finally, after I quit Saheli, I had time. So in 2007, I published a collection of poems called Winter Blossoms and Other Poems. And it was, it was like my gift to Saheli. So whatever money came from the sales of the book went to Saheli. So that book actually got an award in the non-fiction category by...
You talk about it? Winter Blossoms?
So after leaving Saheli, I looked at what poems I had, and then this book came out of that. It was published in 2007, and it got reader reviews. In 2000, it got a Reader Reviewer's Choice Award.
From where?
In Austin.
Great.
So, but what I do now is something, again, that has emerged from the whole life, I guess. So around the time in the 90s when I quit working, I think partly because of my immigrant experience and moving away from home and culture and all that, I was also trying to understand the culture where I come from, the Indian wisdom of the East in general. And so I was doing a lot of self-study on this. I had joined the Chinmay mission. I also had started with some other people a group of people, a self-study group to study Bhagavad Gita. That group still goes on. It has grown. They meet now in Dr. Madhu Godse's house.
Oh.
But we had started that in the 90s. So, but anyway, so I was doing Vedantic studies and things like that. In 2007, I have been practicing yoga for a long time from the 90s, but I wasn't really meditating until 2007 or so when I started meditating. And then I was teaching, I took a training with an organization that was California based, actually India based, which no longer exists, I think. But anyway, I was teaching like a 2-day meditation retreat. And then in 2014, I came across this program by the University of Massachusetts Medical School, Mindfulness-Based Stress Reduction Program. And I took that 8-week program from Geeta Kolagi in Austin. She was a colleague from my anti-violence work days. She was an educator at the University of Texas who was from the beginning of the Voices Against Violence program at the University of Texas. So Geeta had quit that and was teaching MBSR, Mindfulness-Based Stress Reduction. So out of my curiosity, I went and Geeta has been such a good facilitator. I said, yeah, I would go to any of her classes. So I went to that. And I really liked the way that program worked. It combined Eastern principles, Buddhist psychology with Western medicine, and it was a program of the medical school taught completely in a secular way, and so it's for everybody. So that really appealed to me. So I wanted to get deeper into that. From childhood, I was always attracted to Buddhist teachings. And so to see that mindfulness, which stands at the center of Buddhist teachings, Buddhist meditation, actually has been scientifically studied in the US and clinically studied, and it keeps on being researched, and doctors and psychiatrists and psychologists are really buying into it. That was really very encouraging, and because before whenever I have tried to teach meditation to anyone, it had been within a religious, spiritual context. So then your access is very limited. So now when it's a program of a medical school, it's for everybody. So then I trained myself to be an MBSR teacher. So now I teach since I think I completed, that's a very rigorous training, several residential programs. You go to this long silent retreats for days, and you go to many classes. So the program is by the University of Massachusetts Medical School Center for Mindfulness for Society, Healthcare, something else. You don't have to go to Massachusetts for the class. They hold their trainings, different classes throughout the world in different places. So I have taken some in Florida, some in California. I have taken retreats in California at the Spirit Rock Meditation Center. I have studied with well-known teachers in the mindfulness area like Jack Cornfield, Joseph Goldstein, so right now I am a student and a teacher in this area, and I teach this 8-week program twice a year in Austin.
Where in Austin?
Oh, where in Austin? So wherever. I mean, if you invite me to your house and get a few students, I'll teach there.
How much do you charge for that service?
So the market value for this 8-week program in Austin is about $500, and that it's almost 30 hours of instruction. It's like you can think of it as a college course. We meet about once a week, and it has a curriculum.
What curriculum?
The mindfulness-based stress reduction.
Yeah, I mean, what are the aspects that you touch upon?
So it uses. So you basically teach what the name is, mindfulness-based stress reduction. So stress is going to be there. You cannot change, you cannot remove your life situations, right? You know, people you love will die. People you love or you yourself will get sick. Workload will be there. So stressors will be there in everyone's life. You can't change that. What you can change is your relationship with stress. And so how to do that? And it combines meditation, mindful movements, but we learn over the 8 weeks, we learn to take mindfulness to our life, how to live every moment as fully as we can, and being awake and present in each moment. Loving kindness is a big part of it. How to be able to forgive, not live with anger. And this is something I had noticed in my Saheli days. It's very difficult if bad things have happened to you in the past. It's not very easy to it totally changes you. So it's not so easy to just forget and move on. It's going to be a part of you. But so how to make peace with it, how to make peace with your past, how to just fully get most out of the present moment and not miss out what's happening now because you are in the past or you are worrying about the future. So that's what it basically talks about, but through the program is designed in such a way that it unfolds, and you can only get it by practicing it. So it's not something you study and remember, conceptually understand and teach. It's something you have to live and embody, and then only you can teach it. So I'm still learning it.
And you're still teaching it.
And I'm teaching it. Yeah.
So,
I just realized that I haven't said anything about Pratham.
did you start Pratham here?
No, I didn't start it here, but I am big time involved in it.
Okay,
Do you
so
want me
please
to-
tell us what the charity, it's still going on, go ahead. Okay. So what are the charity, apart from your work, what charities are you involved? So that you can tell me now.
So, starting in 2011, the Pratham USA's Austin chapter started. And in 2010 it started, I think. 2011 is when I joined Pratham Austin. I had no idea that 50% of school children in India in 5th grade cannot read at 2nd grade level. They go to school, they learn nothing. And so this was not true when I was in 5th grade. You know, if you didn't know, you would not go to 6th grade. But that is no longer true in India. So children are going to school, they are not learning. This has become a huge problem. So there is an organization in India called Pratham, which works in large scale. They have very low cost programs to pretty much provide free tutoring to kids and make sure that they actually learn, not just go to school. And so they do these learning camps. They work in all the states, pretty much all the states in India. And so I came to know about it. And Pratham USA is an organization of Indians who live in the US, who, all of us who are living here, and we got educated in India, and we are doing well, and we have money to spare. So for them to give something back to the home country and improve the education, child literacy in India. So this is how it started, and it has several chapters in different cities. And the Austin chapter started in 2010. And so Vandana Kumar and Ashish Gupta were the two people who started this chapter in Austin. And I joined it in 2011 when I came to know about it. Again, Vandana is the one who knew me from the Saheli days, and so she invited me. So I have been there almost from the beginning. And so what I do mostly, what I have been doing mostly is do a children's readathon to raise money. So children in the US, they don't have to be Indian. It's the idea of think globally, act locally. So in summer, and we have such long summers, so children read books in summer. They can read whatever they want. and based on what they read, they raise money. And that money goes to Pratham USA and through Pratham USA to India. So last year, so in 2017, whatever money kids raised,
How much?
it was $65,000. And with that, 6,000 kids in India could learn to read. So it's on the website, all the details of exactly which districts are being supported in India. So I have been doing this since 2012. I don't know for how long more I'll do it, but I'm doing it this year.
Great.
So that has been really very interesting for me, because I went and visited a lot of the programs in India, went to many villages and talked to their volunteer staff, the kids, everybody, and it was quite eye-opening, very impressive work.
Did the program help them?
The program helps them. I mean, they have their own methodology. Not only the program is helping those kids, the program, especially their model, the assessment model, the measurement model, and the testing model, those have been very well researched, and that model has been adapted by several other countries now, a dozen or more countries now, in other countries in Asia, in Africa, even in Mexico. So it has been quite an organization to work for too.
Who did the model?
So the kids are going to school, right? And you don't know if they're learning or not. And they could be any age. So the model they use to test, suppose they want to work in a village. The way they do this is, first they have to determine that the village has the need and it has local resources. Which means there are kids who are illiterate that could be literate, and there are youth, like teenagers even, late teens or 20s, who have finished school, may have attended some college, have done well, but still are in the village. They don't have any future. So Pratham puts these two together, trains this youth to become teachers, to tutor kids who are illiterate. They have their own material, own method of teaching, and they teach through camps, learning camps they call them. So kids, and they would create all the educational material from scratch. We're talking about India. It's not something you buy that costs money. Pratham doesn't build schools, that takes money. Children can have the camp anywhere, in a field, if someone donates their courtyard, or the compound of a school, a classroom during after hours. Anywhere they would meet, and they would first they would test where the kid is, and the test is very simple. So they try to find out if the child knows the alphabet. So very simple, one piece of paper, they can tell the level of the kid. If the kid knows the alphabet, if not, okay, 0 level. That's 1 level. If they know the alphabet, can they read simple words? Okay, if they can, that's the second level, if they can't really read words. So similarly, sentence level, paragraph level, and a whole story level. So when you are going to story, you are also looking at comprehension. Similarly with math, do they know the digits? Do they know the place value? Can they, the sequence 1 to 100, 1 to 99? Can they then then the next level would be, can they do simple 2-digit addition and subtraction with carry? And can they do, then the next level would be, can they multiply and divide? And then the higher level would be problem solving. Can they do a word problem? So depending on, going from that to that very quickly with volunteers, they can go to the house and test the kids and assign them what level they are. And they do, Pratham started this program of testing the education level of children in all of India. It's called ASAR. They do a big report every year. And the government now recognizes it. Initially they didn't, but then they saw the value of it. So it's fairly well known, this ASAR testing. And that's the one that has been being taken, that's the model of evaluation that's being taken to all these different countries. But the teaching again, so their goal is to take in that learning camp, even if it's 1 week, to advance the learning level of every kid that attends that camp by 1 to 2 levels higher. So they would do pre-test, post-test, and they would work with, in small groups, 1 tutor, at most 10 kids, 10 to 12, at the same level. Doesn't matter, the age doesn't matter. And then they do, they learn through games, like they create their own flashcards, whatever else they need, posters and all that. So that was a lot of fun to go and visit and watch. And so I speak about that to people here as part of the Pratham Austin board.
Are you on the board?
I'm in the board of Pratham Austin, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And nationally, I do this readathon nationally. So I manage all the different teams in different cities that join. It's all set up online, so fundraising is easier.
Finally, I want to ask you, how much of whatever you've done, is it a conscious effort for you to have done all that, or they all fell into your lap, and how you made use of it? And what is your satisfaction level about your life as such?
I am very satisfied with my life. I have no regrets. My life was never planned to be in any way. I never had any ambition. I never had any plan. I mean, things have happened. Everything that has happened has been, wow, a surprise, an unfolding. I think I have just learned to trust. Just trust that things happen in a certain way, and how we take it is all we can do. And we can be grumpy about it, we can resent it, or we can embrace it. And the other thing that's really important to me, you asked, if there's one thing I would say to someone young, what is it that I would say? And based on my life, I think I would say that just keep on learning. Keep on learning until you die. I hope I am able to do that.
Okay. And What is your experience in Austin that sort of is special, that stands out?
You know, I felt home in Austin from day one. The day we came in 1974, it was August, it was pouring. It felt like Indian monsoon. It was hot and it was pouring. And I said, oh, this is home. and then people were so friendly. People thought that from the way we looked, people thought that we spoke Spanish. So they would start speaking in Spanish with us, and we would say, oh, we don't understand. And then they would say in Spanish, oh, you don't understand. And then they keep on speaking in Spanish. Didn't matter. So I just found people to be very friendly, the place to be just right, you know. In the 70s, Austin was a small town. You could go from one place, one end to the other end in 15 minutes. And whatever, everything, anything you needed was there. So I just loved it from day one. But I have grown with it. You know, I was in my 20s when I came here, and now I'm in my 60s. I've lived here all these years, so the city has grown and I have grown. And so, but just whatever I needed, and I have done so many different things in my life. When I felt like I needed to go to school, University of Texas was there. When I was just dying to work and earn money of my own, I found a job in Austin. And I moved well in my career. Then when that wasn't anymore serving me well anymore, and I wanted to stay home, I was able to do that because my husband was earning bread for us. And then the children, you know, they both were born and raised in Austin. They connected with Austin, you know. For a long time, even though I loved Austin, I didn't think of Austin as home. And in my language, it would come up like every trip to India was, I'm going home, and then I'm going back. So that was home for me. And then my older son was 5 years old, and one day I was talking about going home and talking about India as if that was home, and this as if I just live here. And he, in a very innocent way, he said, but Mom, this is our home. And then it just dawned on me. I said, oh my God, this is my child's home. It better be my home. And so then I started looking at it very differently. And then after I became a citizen, I also started looking at issues, and you know, then I had to vote and all that. So you know, the whole process has been nice and quite a learning experience. And I think that being an immigrant has some advantage, that because I am an immigrant, I took special effort to know more about my culture, because others would ask it, you know. And if I don't know, you know, I don't know. If I were in India, nobody cared if I didn't know anything. So, but there was this this thing that comes with being an immigrant also, that you are considered an expert when you are not. And so you become like an unofficial ambassador, especially in those days when there were so few. So it was pretty scary, you know. I have to talk about this. I don't know anything about it. So I mean, you just try to learn whatever you could. So that was that. And I don't know if I would have written poetry if I hadn't worked in those things. So, everything just happened. If somebody had told me you would be working, helping battered women when I was, 30 years old, I would have just totally thought that, it's crazy. But then 10 years later, that's what I did. And then when I was totally involved in Saheli, other people didn't think that I could quit, but I did. It was time for that. It was a time for everything. And then I didn't know that I would be a meditation teacher. It just happened. So things just happen. It's a process, and you just have to trust the process and make most of where you are.
Great. Thank you.